What's going on, guys? Dan with PC Tech Hustle coming at you with another video, and today I got for you guys a bit of a different video, meaning we're not even actually going after building a gaming PC this time. And in fact, what we're doing here is building a NAS Unraid server. So as my channel is growing here, I am in further need of some reliable and redundant storage, and I looked into Unraid and I found that it should fit the bill. So without further ado, I want to take you guys on a journey of my server build here, explain to you why I picked the parts and why they are here, and hopefully will be a good, viable working solution for me, as well as an option for you guys. So let's get cracking into these parts, give you guys a brief explanation of why I chose one particular part over the other, and that's coming at you guys right now. Alrighty guys, and before we get deep into the parts here, I want to mention if you are new to this channel and you like NAS server builds like this or any other PC tech related content, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and don't forget to tick that bell notification icon. That way you're informed of whenever I drop my latest content. And also I want to make one other quick mention to the Illuminated Nerd, who I basically spoke with and am modeling closely my build after. He's got an absolutely phenomenal tutorial, a very long part series that takes you through all the intricate facets of building up an Unraid server, what type of hardware to go after, etc, etc, etc. So I can't mention his channel enough as far as probably being one of the best tutorials on YouTube. I really can't compete with that, and mine's just kind of a overview of what I'm doing. I want to point you guys off to his channel in the top right corner there. Go check out his video if you want a full comprehensive guide on how to actually get Unraid up and running from the very beginning all the way through very complex things like Plex Media setup, VMs, etc, etc, etc. So go check him out. Alrighty, so now we are going to swing down closer to these parts, talk about what all I got on the table and what function they'll serve in this build. Alrighty guys, so now that we're close up to the parts, I first just wanted to mention that the fabulous thing about Unraid is you can basically pick and choose the parts you really want to use. You can get on the kind of server grade level that I have done here, or you can actually just use basic consumer hardware. So the budgets can definitely vary, and the amount that you want to spend can vary, and the amount of things that you want to gain and get from your build can vary as well. But the great thing being is that all this is something that you can go on eBay and get on the cheap, which is what my intention was here, is get a good budget build together. That way I'm spending the least amount possible to get exactly what I need. So my intent for this build was exclusively going for storage over anything else, though with Unraid obviously there's many other features that are available to it, but so really my main function and purpose was for the storage aspect. So like with most of my builds, we'll start here with the motherboard as the first component we talk about. So right here we have a Supermicro MB X9 SCL LGA55 board. So it's a micro ATX form factor. It's of the Sandy Bridge era of motherboard, basically older, cheaper stuff. The main things I was targeting with this board was the chipset actually has onboard video, so I don't have to invest in any type of video card or video output display or a CPU that actually has integrated graphics. So that was a big win for me there. 2, this is a server grade board that supports ECC memory, which we'll talk about here in a minute. 3, has expandable PCIe slots. These are 2 PCIe 3.0 for a SAS card, which we'll also talk about, as well as a built-in USB slot for my flash drive, which will contain the Unraid OS. Additionally here too, the motherboard is pretty featureful for a micro ATX board, which is really nice. There's lots of fan headers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is really cool to see. One thing that it is definitely lacking here though is some USB 3.0, which for a server I'm really not concerned about, considering I'm never really going to need front peripherals anyway, and USB 2.0 should be fine here out back. But again, I guess that is a bit of a weakness on this board. We only have 2 USB 2.0 slots. Additionally, what I like here as well is the ability to team these 2 network ports together for increased bandwidth and resiliency. So that's pretty cool to see as well. So this board basically meets all my functions. I'm also not focusing on using many of the SATA ports, actually just one for my cache drive, which we'll get into as well. But this, again, met my needs. It was only $43 on eBay, so it was definitely a good bargain for what I'm trying to accomplish. So the motherboard being basically a second gen or Sandy Bridge motherboard supporting the LGA 55 socket, what I also wanted to get was a Xeon processor that fit the bill, was able to support ECC memory, as well as work just right out of the box with the motherboard. So what I got here is a Xeon E3 1230 V2 CPU. So you could go a little bit cheaper as far as the CPUs that are supported within this motherboard, and I guess I could have. I did opt to spend about $43 on this CPU, again, a used component on eBay. The great thing I like about this is it's 4 cores, 8 threads, so if I decide to add some minor level VM support, I have some threads to give to that, as well as I got some pretty decent core clocks on this, being a 3.3 gigahertz chip, so not bad considering, so I think it'll fit the bill definitely for a storage. And to cool the CPU, we just got a stock Intel cooler, which I purchased off of eBay as well. You can get these things brand new on eBay. Obviously you can see it is brand new, as the thermal compound is still pre-applied, which is kind of neat and nice. Don't really need to go overboard with these Xeon chips. They don't run hot, they don't pull a lot of wattage, so this will be plenty fine to keep the CPU cool and quiet. So speaking of memory, since we've already spoke about it a couple times already, so what we have here is 4x4 gig sticks to make a total of 16 gigs of DDR3 ECC unbuffered memory. The reason I went with this is mainly because, well, this motherboard supports ECC memory as well as the CPU being server grade stuff, so it only made sense to put server grade component memory in the build. And what we get with ECC memory is basically that assurance of forward error correction in case we have some particular data loss occur, that we don't completely lose all of our data and we have that forward error correction to protect us. Next major component here is the SAS drive, and why we went with a SAS drive is to accomplish 2 tasks. One, to better cable manage our SATA connections, so that way out of all those 8, or I guess you can count 9 with the SSD, 9 hard drives that you have here, we don't have to plug in a SATA cable to each slot on the motherboard. And actually, if you look, we don't even have 8 or even 9 SATA ports here, so we have a total of 6. So that presents an issue, obviously. So to get around that easily, you can go with a SAS card, which allows you to break off 4x4, a total of 8 SATA connections from the SAS ports. Additionally, what this allows us to do is to interface the data communication from the hard drives through the other bits of the build, being the processor and everything, through the PCIe Express lanes, versus most times what you get, and not always, on SATA ports where it actually uses chipset lanes. So you're gonna get the most benefit of your data transfer and the fastest, most possible rates. Speaking of the SAS card too, what we had to do is purchase a couple breakout cables. So this is a 4 and a 4 breakout cable that plug directly into the SAS card via the SAS cable port here that breaks us off into 4 times SATA connections. Now, one thing you need to be careful of with that is making sure that you're buying a SAS to SATA cable, because there are SAS cables that look very similar to SATA cables, which we'll kind of discuss here with my chassis as well. So know that if you have a SAS card that has the SAS ports on one end and you have SATA hard drives, you have to find a SAS to SATA cable to interconnect all the devices properly. So before we jump into the hard drives that we have out sitting in front of us, I'll talk quickly about the flash drive here. So this is just a 32 gigabyte model SanDisk Cruiser. This was literally a $7 to $8 part on Amazon. You could even go with a smaller. I think you don't need much at all for an Unraid install, but I saw a 32 gig for $7. I said, wow, what the heck, you know, this should be fine. And the thing that I like about it here is it's a very small form factor. So it'll plug into the direct USB port on our motherboard without protruding off and catching on anything or getting in the way. Alrighty, so let's discuss these hard drives. So as you can see, we have 9 in total, and we have 8 of those that are 3.5-inch spinning drives. So this is where a NAS server can get very different as far as your build structure, especially when you're considering Unraid, because technically with Unraid, you can put literally anything together and create a pool of network storage. So I'll get this SSD out of the way so we can talk a little bit more about the spinning drives here. So this will be comprised of our total pool, which is actually in total, if you're counting up all the drives here, 36 terabytes. So we have 7 total 4 terabyte drives, as well as a 8 terabyte Seagate Barracuda NAS drive, which I'll talk about why that's different here in a moment. But out of those 8, we have 6 Dell Enterprise 4 terabyte hard drives. So I actually got really lucky with this. I work in IT for my company, and we were going through some decoms, and this stuff, being the Dell hard drives, was actually on a list of e-waste and was going going to get destroyed or thrown away. So being 4 terabyte drives each, and actually these drives have very little wear and tear on them, as I did crystal disk info all of them. They are in really good shape, and since they were going out with the trash, I figured, well, you know, might as well make good use of them and create a little storage server on the side. So that saved me a ton of money as far as storage capacity. But know that you don't have to have this much storage. You literally could just have 2 hard drives if you wanted and just continue to expand on that. That is another benefit of Unraid. But since I had a really good start, I figured I'd give it a really good finish here. So speaking of that, I did have an extra Barracuda 4 terabyte hard drive that I'm just kind of throwing into the mix. But lastly, what I wanted to talk about here is this Seagate Iron Wolf drive. So this I did buy new, and this is an 8 terabyte drive that usually goes for about $250. So yes, I've only really invested $250 in my total storage capacity, not counting the SSD, which we'll talk about here in a sec. Lucky for me, but know that you don't have to go this extreme. My intent was behind this 8 terabyte drive is this is to become my parity drive that I expand from. So with Unraid, you have a parity drive that basically you copy bits of data from each of your hard drive to rebuild if you have one fail. So the idea here for me was I start big, at least with the parity drive, because you can't really expand anything larger than your parity drive. So if I start big with a parity drive at 8 terabytes and later replace these all with 8 terabyte drives, it'll be as simple as just throwing the disk in and letting the pool build. So lastly, we'll talk about the cache drive, which we've kind of made quick mentions of already. This is an ADATA SSD 240 gig drive. Now you might be wondering, what the heck are you throwing that really low grade SSD into a server build for? Well, this is the cache drive. So one, we don't need super reliable medium for cache drives, because if a cache drive fails, just replace it. Hopefully you have the mover set on Unraid to actually get your data off of it at a regular rate, but I shouldn't have to worry about this drive failing like ever. And even if it does, it's a cheap replacement. So I didn't really see the need to invest a lot of money in a cache drive, knowing that it's going to be the drive that gets worn out the most and is going to have the most volatility to fail. One last thing too, I forgot to mention, being that the SSD or cache drive, it cost me about $28 on Amazon. So really good value part for what we're doing with it. All right, and before we swing the chassis around, which is actually kind of my most exciting part that I wanted to talk about, just want to talk about the power supply. And if you guys notice, some of these parts are out of their boxes, mainly because they are used parts, but actually this power supply is brand new. And for a new server build, I would suggest definitely doing that as well. Get yourself a new power supply. But I did kind of have to pick and choose what I got. So I knew I wanted to go with at least a bronze rated supply that was around 400 to 500 watts, just give or take, have plenty of headroom of power. Additionally, I wanted to make sure I got a reputable brand. So as you guys know, my channel, I usually cover EVGA power supplies quite a bit, sometimes thermal takes, but EVGA definitely I think is a notch above as far as quality. But like I said, main thing being I wanted to go for something that was efficient and reliable. And so what I did was I stumbled on a 500 watt BA power supply that I just so happened to find on PC Part Picker, and I snagged up for about $65. That is a lot of money for a 500 watt 80 plus bronze power supply, but at the same time, power supplies are not a cheap component nowadays, and they've been very volatile. So know that really you could probably end up spending between $35 and $45 for a quality unit such as this, but we just are getting hit with the pandemic tax, I guess we'll call it. All right, so then now let's talk about the chassis that we have up front and center. So what we have here is the Silverstone CS380B NAS chassis. So this is specifically a NAS chassis, and I really wanted to go with that mainly because I wanted to do it right. And not gonna lie, this case was kind of awesome after I discovered it. I was really looking for cases that had a lot of drive support, meaning space, and actually most modern gaming cases don't have a lot of that anymore. And I didn't really want a gaming case, and I don't need a gaming case. So basically what I stumbled on was this Silverstone case. Now here is the big sexy part about this case. We have an open and lockable front door, and what we have here is hot swappable bays. So this is actually 8 hot swappable bays that will plug into a backplane on the inside of the case here that give us that drive support. So pretty awesome stuff here. All right, and without making the video too long here, I just want to quickly just point out the features of this case that really were a selling factor for me. As we mentioned here, in the front, we have the hot swappable bays that allows us to swap out hard drives in a moment's notice without any system downtime. Additionally, here, if we pull out this side cover, we have some perforation here on the side, which is actually the main front intake to the system. And on the side too, we also have a removable dust filter if we want to clean that off. But this was a big selling factor for me because I wanted to look for, since I'm gonna have drives that are gonna be spinning for quite a bit of time, I wanted some active cooling on those drives, which this provides, as well as that is actually butt up right against the backplane, which provides all the power and data ports for our hard drives. So the really cool thing about a powered backplane too is it also helps you mitigate some of the cable mess. So as we can see here, as I'll try to get a little closer, there are actually 4 power connections, which I thought was kind of odd because it's a SATA, and SATA, and then we have 1 Molex. But basically that powers your entire backplane, so we don't have to mess with 8 power cable connections as opposed to 4 here. So that's a good perk, and that was one thing that wasn't really 100% a selling factor for me, but once I saw it, I fell in love with it and I knew I wanted it. Alrighty guys, so that covers all the hardware in this build and their particular use case for the build. So what left to do other than cut over some build montage, followed up with a bit of a discussion of this total build. Alrighty guys, so we have Unraid now powered on, the server powered on, and we are actually just at the very beginning setup stages of the Unraid OS and initializing drive pools, etc. So let's take a quick look at that. Though, as I mentioned, this isn't going to be a full-on tutorial how to set yours up really. As I mentioned, the Illuminated Nerd has a great tutorial on that. This is just me documenting my story of building up the hardware, the server itself, and getting it up and running. So let's take a quick look at what we got here real fast. All right, so here she is running in all of her glory. So one thing I wanted to point out real quick is the power supply. I did mount it facing up only because there really isn't any other intake involved with this case at all other than just these two side fans. So I at least wanted to have some way of pulling kind of positive airflow across the chassis. So obviously we do have the one fan up top as the main exhaust fan. You know, the CPU cooler isn't really serving much function as far as pulling air into the system, but really I thought, well, you know, if I had the power supply actually pulling air through the system, kind of instead of having its own kind of ecosystem with it mounted down, it definitely helps us kind of create some more positive airflow, because this system's going to be always on, right? All right, so now let's pan over here to the OS. So what we got here is, you know, just named the server PC Tech Hustle, and this is basically the main dashboard. So it looks like we got all of our drives recognized. At least there's 9 listing there, and we got a little bit of information about our CPU running. Obviously it's not running much at all, like 1%. So then we also have the memory recognized, all full 16 gigs. Again, kind of the utilizations, which is cool to see, is pretty low, obviously, because we're not really doing anything. And then our interface is just, you know, we have one single interface plugged in over here on the back of the system. So yeah, I mean, this is basically it as far as, I mean, I'm just getting started. So I'm gonna have to probably go back and actually, as I mentioned, watch the Illuminated Nerds videos on doing all the kind of the core setup things, setting up shares, setting up security, setting up all the other things. So I'm just kind of in the beginning stages after we've got the hardware running. So the good thing being here is we know the hardware is up and running. It's looking like it's doing well. So I'm gonna have to obviously do a lot more work as far as getting the server completely operational as an Unraid network attached storage. So guys, I'd say this pretty much wraps up the video. Like I mentioned, this isn't gonna be a full-on tutorial how to get started. I definitely can't compete with some of the other videos that are out there, specifically the ones I've mentioned. Those are great tutorials. So again, I'll put links to those videos and those content creators, because mainly, obviously, the Illuminated Nerd, who I'd said has basically one of the best tutorials I've found on YouTube. So everybody's type of scenario is different, so that's why I didn't really factor in drives as a cost. And also, you know, I did so happen to get pretty lucky in my scenario. But all in all, what I spent on the parts, which I'll have links to in the description below that you guys can model your builds after if you think this was a good route to go, I spent $487 on the core components. And what I mean by core components, the motherboard, RAM, CPU, all the things that actually make the system run. Lastly, also, you know, I just wanted to cover this build because I wanted to build something. So as cool as the Synology product is, or say FreeNAS, which was kind of my other potential go-to, which I decided against, mainly because of expandability is not as friendly as Unraid, but I wanted to build something. I mean, you guys know me. This is what my channel is all about, and if I can do things on a budget like this and really build something that's powerful and useful, even with older hardware, then I mean, that ticks all the boxes of what my channel is all about, right? So other than that, as mentioned, you know, I do have all the links in the description below for all the products that I use. Feel free to check those out. And some of them are also affiliate marketing links for Amazon. So if you decide to purchase through Amazon, you know, it helps give a little bit of a kickback to my channel. It helps me keep producing content like this for you guys. But also make sure you guys do the YouTube thing, right? Give me a like if you enjoy this content, and tell me what your NAS servers are all about. Did you go with a Synology product, a free NAS? Was I crazy to use Unraid, or did I make some kind of odd decisions here that you might do differently, or maybe some things you might do better? I'm just curious, because honestly, I'm just getting into this. But other than that, guys, thanks for tuning into this one. I appreciate your time, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.